Eleanor tightened the strap of her handbag as she stepped off the plane in Minneapolis. Her heart beat with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Thanksgiving had always been her favorite holiday, a time of family, warmth, and tradition. And when her son, Liam, had called and said, "Mom, it won't be the same without you. Please come," she had believed him. She had packed carefully, her good cardigan, the pie dish she'd used every year, and the last bit of hope she carried that maybe this year would be different. Gate 3A, she stood among the crowd of expectant faces. Families reunited in bursts of laughter and tears. Children held handmade signs. Spouses rushed into long embraces. Eleanor, however, stood alone, her small suitcase at her side, her coat folded neatly over her arm. She told herself to be patient. After all, flights ran late. Traffic was unpredictable. Surely, Liam and Sarah would appear any moment, waving and smiling, ready to fold her into the celebration. But time slipped by. 5 minutes became 10, then 40. The arrival board showed her flight had landed long ago. She checked her phone again. The last message from Sarah had been simple. "We'll be there. Kids can't wait to see you, Red Heart." Eleanor had even replied with excitement. "Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone." No response. Her phone buzzed, and for a fleeting second her chest lifted with relief, only to sink again when she saw it wasn't a call or a text, but a notification from social media. Out of habit, she tapped it open. And there it was, her son, Liam, in the navy sweater she'd given him last Christmas. Sarah, smiling wide, tanned and flawless. Their children, Elliot and Ruby, grinning around a glowing Thanksgiving table. Candles flickered, turkey and mashed potatoes filled the plates, and in the center sat a golden pie. A pie that wasn't hers, the caption read, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." Eleanor stared at the photo until her eyes blurred. There was no mistaking it. The family she had crossed states to see had already begun the holiday without her, and without a thought for her place at the table. She felt suddenly like an abandoned parcel in a crowded terminal, waiting for a claimed ticket that would never come. But she did not cry. Not yet. Instead, she pulled on her coat with quiet dignity, picked up her suitcase, and began to walk. Past the balloons and flowers, past the lines of taxis, past the joyful chaos of other people being wanted. She realized, with a sharp clarity that cut through the cold November air, she would not be waiting for them to remember her. Not today. Not anymore. 3 days before the flight, Eleanor had been sitting in her quiet kitchen, sipping lukewarm tea, when the phone rang. The caller ID lit up with her son's name, Liam. Her heart gave a small leap. He rarely called, and when he did, it was usually brief, distracted, or tied to some practical request. But this time, his voice came through warm, sweetened like honey poured too thick. "Mom, we really want you here for Thanksgiving," Liam had said. "It just wouldn't be the same without you." The words melted her doubts. For weeks, she had wondered if she should invite herself, or if she'd be intruding. Now, hearing him say she was needed, she felt a surge of validation. She imagined Sarah setting the table, the children asking, "When will Grandma get here?" She imagined belonging again. Eleanor reached for her checkbook later that afternoon. The flight wasn't cheap, but she told herself family was worth it. She went online, booked the ticket, and even splurged on a seat with extra legroom. She wanted to arrive rested, not worn out. The following day, she visited a small boutique in town and bought a new wool coat. Her old one was still serviceable, but she thought of Sarah's sharp eyes, the way her daughter-in-law always seemed to appraise her as though she were part of the furniture. Eleanor wanted to look polished, presentable. She imagined walking through the airport doors and seeing Liam smile, proud to have her there. Yet beneath the excitement was a faint unease she couldn't quite name. Liam's voice, though sweet, had carried something hollow, too rehearsed, too careful. It was the way he used to sound as a teenager when he wanted the car keys or extra money, like affection slipped on as a costume to secure what he really needed, but she pushed the doubt away. After all, hadn't he said the holiday wouldn't be the same without her? Surely no one lied about something like that. As she folded the new coat into her suitcase, Eleanor allowed herself to believe she was wanted, not as an obligation, not as an afterthought, but as family. What she did not yet realize was that the invitation had never been born of love, but of convenience, and that she was stepping into a holiday that had no true seat for her at the table. The streets outside were slick with November drizzle by the time Eleanor found herself in front of a narrow diner with a neon sign that flickered the words Tina's Diner. The warmth from inside spilled onto the sidewalk each time the door opened, carrying the scent of brewed coffee, fried bacon, and something sweetly spiced. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't eaten since the bag of pretzels on the plane. She stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. The diner was modest, red vinyl booths, formica tables, the faint hum of an old jukebox in the corner. A waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile greeted her with a simple, "Just you, hon?" Eleanor nodded, forcing a smile, and slid into a booth by the window. The menu was laminated and worn from years of use, but she hardly needed to read it. Her eyes went straight to the desserts. Pumpkin pie. She ordered a slice and a cup of coffee, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. When the pie arrived, it was warm, fragrant with cinnamon and nutmeg, the crust golden and imperfect. Steam curled upward, as if inviting her to take comfort. She picked up her fork and took the first bite. Sweet, earthy, spiced, familiar, but also liberating. For the first time that day, she tasted something that felt like it belonged to her. Around her, conversations buzzed. A trucker joking with the cook, a young couple debating Christmas decorations, an old man reading a newspaper over black coffee. None of them noticed her, yet she didn't feel invisible. She felt unburdened, as she ate slowly, savoring each bite. The clarity arrived. A thought so sharp and undeniable it nearly startled her. She didn't have to keep waiting for Liam to remember her sacrifices. Waiting for Sarah to soften and see her as more than a wallet. Waiting for an apology, an acknowledgement, some scrap of tenderness. She realized she had built her life around expectations that never came true, and every disappointment was a wound reopened. But here, in the quiet company of strangers, with nothing more than a slice of pumpkin pie, she discovered peace. Peace in lowering her expectations to zero. Peace in letting go of the hope that those who had hurt her would ever try to heal her. Eleanor set down her fork and wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug, breathing in the steam. For the first time in a long while, her chest loosened. She didn't feel abandoned. She felt free. Back home, the house felt colder than usual. The silence greeted Eleanor at the door, familiar yet different now. This time, it wasn't loneliness pressing against her chest. It was awareness. She hung up her new coat, still crisp from the boutique, and set her suitcase down by the stairs. Instead of unpacking right away, she went straight to her desk. The oak desk had been hers for decades, its drawers filled with receipts, files, and tidy records of a life she had lived with discipline. Eleanor pulled open the bottom drawer and began stacking folders on the surface. One by one, she opened them. Credit card statements, old bank transfers, handwritten notes reminding her of checks written long ago. At first, she scanned them idly, but soon a pattern emerged, one she had known in her bones, but had never laid out in black and white. Here was the check for Liam's car insurance, paid every 6 months for nearly a decade. Here was the loan for home repairs, the new roof, the kitchen remodel, costs Sarah had insisted were too much for the young family to handle. Here was a binder full of tuition payments, quietly covered so Liam could finish his degree without debt. Page after page, the weight of her giving revealed itself. 15 years of financial lifelines, all threaded through her sacrifices. She had poured into their lives, not begrudgingly, but out of love. And yet, what had she received? Polite phone calls at Christmas. Obligatory birthday cards signed without warmth. Invitations to holidays that seemed more like afterthoughts than genuine gestures. Eleanor leaned back at her chair, exhaustion washing over her. For the first time, she named it clearly. She had been financing their comfort while starving herself of real connection. They hadn't needed her presence. They had needed her purse. She pressed her palms against the desk and steadied her breath. No tears came this time, only resolve. She realized that if she continued down this road, she would die not only unseen, but used so. She picked up a fresh notebook and uncapped her pen. At the top of the page, she wrote in firm, steady letters, a plan for change. The first step: cut every unnecessary tie that drained her without giving anything back. The second: take control of her finances, her future, and stop allowing Liam and Sarah to dictate her role in the family through dependency. The third: find where her love could actually grow, not be squandered. As she closed the notebook, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in years: the spark of power. She was no longer a background character in her own story. She was preparing to reclaim it. The next morning, Eleanor dressed with care. She chose her navy blouse, the one that made her feel composed, and a string of pearls that had once belonged to her mother. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. Today was not a day for hesitation. Today was for severing ties. At the bank, she sat across from a young advisor whose smile faltered as she slid a folder across the desk. Inside were account numbers, schedules of automatic payments, and authorizations bearing her son's signature. "I'd like all of these stopped," Eleanor said, her voice calm but resolute. "Every last one." The advisor blinked, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Grant, are you certain? Some of these have been in place for years. It might cause complications." Eleanor folded her hands neatly on the desk. "The complications," she replied, "have already lasted 15 years. Today they end." One by one, signatures were crossed out, authorizations revoked. Eleanor watched the advisor's pen move across the forms, and with each stroke, she felt a weight lifting. By the time the final page was stamped and filed, her chest felt lighter than it had in decades. Her next stop was the lawyer's office. The smell of polished wood and leather-bound books greeted her as she entered. Mr. Dalton, her attorney of 20 years, looked up in surprise when she requested to revise her will immediately. "Of course," he said, pulling a thick file from the cabinet. "What changes are you considering?" Eleanor did not waver. "Remove Liam and Sarah from all provisions. Instead, I want a trust established for Emma." The lawyer hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "May I ask why?" "Because love is not measured by obligation," she answered. "It's measured by respect. And Emma is the only one who's shown me that." Together, they drafted the changes. A trust for Emma, designed to support her education, her future, her independence. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity, about ensuring her life's work went to someone who saw her as more than a bank account. When the papers were signed, Eleanor leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. She had thought the act might leave her hollow, but instead, she felt filled with certainty, with freedom, with a quiet strength she hadn't known in years. Walking out of the office into the crisp November air, she realized she had drawn the first true boundary of her life. It was not punishment. It was liberation, and for the first time in a long while, she felt she was finally standing on her own side. The letter had been brief, just a few pages in Eleanor's neat, slanted handwriting. She hadn't expected a reply, at least not right away. But 3 days later, her phone buzzed with a message that made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. "Grandma, I got your letter. Can I come see you this weekend?" Emma Eleanor stared at the screen for a long moment, rereading the words until they blurred. No demands, no guilt, no questions about money. Just a desire to be there. When Saturday came, Eleanor opened her front door to find Emma standing on the porch, her cheeks pink from the cold, her hair tucked under a knitted beanie. She carried no bouquet, no grand gesture, just a backpack slung over her shoulder and a smile that was both shy and genuine. "Hi, Grandma," she said simply. "Hi, sweetheart." Eleanor's voice trembled as she drew her in for a hug. The embrace was warm, real, uncalculated. For a moment, Eleanor let herself breathe in the scent of her granddaughter's shampoo and the honesty of being held. Inside, the house seemed brighter with Emma in it. They settled at the kitchen table, where Eleanor had set out a small spread of tea and butter cookies. Emma chatted about her college classes, her part-time job at the bookstore, and the stray cat that had started following her home. Eleanor listened, truly listened, the way she used to when Liam was young, before everything became about responsibility and repayment. Later, Emma spotted the chessboard in the living room. "Do you still play?" she asked. "Not as often as I'd like," Eleanor admitted, a smile tugging at her lips. They set up the pieces, the board worn smooth from years of games past. Emma made the first move, and soon the room was filled with the soft clack of pawns and knights, punctuated by laughter when one of them made a daring move or a silly mistake. Between games, the conversations grew deeper. Emma spoke about how distant her father had become, how Sarah's presence seemed to swallow up the family dynamic. "Sometimes it feels like he's someone else," Emma said quietly, moving her rook across the board. "But you, Grandma, you've always felt like home." Eleanor's throat tightened. She reached across the table and placed her hand over Emma's. "And you, my dear, are the only one who still sees me. Not as a purse. Not as an obligation. Just me." Emma squeezed her hand in return, her eyes shimmering with unspoken understanding. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed in the guest room, Eleanor sat alone in her armchair, a blanket over her knees. Yet she did not feel alone. For the first time in years, she wasn't angry. She wasn't waiting for apologies that would never come. She had Emma. She had connection. And that was enough. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon when Sarah appeared at Eleanor's doorstep. She arrived unannounced, wrapped in a sleek wool coat, her perfume preceding her like an invisible cloud. Eleanor opened the door, her face calm but unreadable. "Eleanor," Sarah began with a strained smile. "May I come in?" Eleanor stepped aside wordlessly, motioning toward the sitting room. Sarah walked in, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her posture that of someone preparing for negotiation rather than reconciliation. They sat across from each other, a low table between them. Sarah crossed her legs, smoothing her skirt, and gave a sigh that sounded rehearsed. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding," she said. "The airport pickup, Liam thought I was going. I thought he was going. And the Thanksgiving photo? We had friends over, it wasn't meant to exclude you." Her tone was gentle, almost coaxing, but her eyes flickered with impatience. Eleanor listened quietly, hands folded in her lap. When Sarah paused, waiting for sympathy, Eleanor spoke, her voice steady as stone. "No, Sarah. This isn't about a misunderstanding. This is about a pattern." Sarah blinked. "A pattern?" "Yes," Eleanor continued, her tone firm. "A pattern of being invited not out of love, but out of convenience. A pattern of being tolerated, not welcomed. And now, a pattern of excuses dressed up as apologies." Sarah's polished composure slipped for a moment, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You're making it sound worse than it is. We do care about you." Eleanor shook her head slowly. "No. You care about what I provide. My money, my help, my silence. But you don't care about me." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto Sarah's. "And you're not sorry for how you've treated me. You're only sorry that I finally stopped accepting less than I deserve." The words landed heavy in the room, slicing through Sarah's carefully crafted defenses. For the first time, Sarah had no immediate reply. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, her usual confidence faltering. Eleanor leaned back, her shoulders relaxing. She had nothing more to prove, nothing more to beg for. "I don't need apologies that mean nothing," she added softly. "And I will no longer live under your terms." Sarah stood after a long silence, her face tight, her voice clipped. "If that's how you feel, then fine." She adjusted her coat, her heels clicking once again as she headed to the door. Eleanor didn't stop her. She didn't offer comfort or ask her to stay. When the door closed, the silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean. Pure. The silence of a boundary finally set. The days after Sarah's visit passed quietly, yet each morning Eleanor felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had slipped off her shoulders. She woke not with dread, but with a sense of spaciousness, an open field in her heart where bitterness once grew. One crisp afternoon, She sat at her writing desk and penned a short letter to Emma. Along with it, she wrapped her most treasured possession, a pair of silver earrings her own mother had given her on her wedding day. They were not extravagant, but they carried generations of love, a thread of history no money could buy. Eleanor placed them carefully into a small velvet pouch and tucked them inside the envelope with a copy of the revised will. "My dearest Emma," she wrote, "these earrings belong to you now, just as my trust and my love always have. I want you to know that you are my legacy, not because of what I can give, but because of who you are. Never forget that you are enough, exactly as you are." When she sealed the envelope and set it by the door for the postman, Eleanor felt no sadness, only clarity. Liam and Sarah had no claim over her anymore, not her money, not her time, not her peace. She owed them nothing. As December rolled in, Eleanor brought down the holiday decorations from the attic. For years, she had decorated half-heartedly, waiting for an invitation that never truly came, hoping her efforts might somehow draw her family back to her. But this year, every ornament, every garland, every candle was for her. She strung lights along the banister, hung a wreath on the door, and placed a small tree in the corner of the living room. She even baked a pie, pumpkin, of course, not for anyone else, but to savor in her own company. When she placed it on the cooling rack, the scent filling the house, she smiled. Evenings became rituals of self-discovery. She lit candles and read novels she'd been putting off for years. She brewed tea in her favorite porcelain cup instead of saving it for special occasions. She took long walks in the cold air, pausing to notice the crunch of leaves under her boots, the sharp beauty of winter stars. There was no loneliness now, only solitude, chosen and embraced. And in that solitude, she found something richer than she had ever imagined. Herself on Christmas Eve, Eleanor sat by the fire, the glow of the tree lights reflecting in her glasses. She thought of Emma, of their laughter over the chessboard, of the future she had chosen to invest in. She thought of her own life, not as something diminished, but as something renewed. For the first time in decades, Eleanor knew with certainty she was free. Free from the weight of conditional love. Free to savor her days. Free to love herself without apology. And she was not alone because she had herself, and that, finally, was enough.